here in the construction project, and I'm here to do a video on William Faulkner. Faulkner is one of the great modern writers. And why is that? He is one of the great modern writers because of his style. He did somewhat similar stream of consciousness type approach to prose fiction, somewhat similar to James Joyce in Ulysses with that stream of consciousness stuff, although they were definitely each doing their own thing and had individual originality to each. But Faulkner is a great writer, and he's considered a great writer. He's a Southern American from the USA, so he gets lumped in with what people call Southern Gothic authors, which also includes Flannery O'Connor, probably most famously, and some others. And but Faulkner stylistically is the best of those, and one of the best American writers maybe of them all. So why have I called this video Faulkner Sucks? Obviously he doesn't suck, but there is something about his work that I haven't heard anybody else say, and I feel strongly about the point I'm about to present. I am also from the USA, also from the South. I've lived in a lot of the southern, eastern U.S. states, and I currently live in one of the more northern of the southern eastern U.S. states. And so I've lived in places Faulkner was writing about and living in. And I have some understanding, maybe a little extra than some other people do who haven't lived in this area of the United States, about the South and all the intricacies. Obviously slavery is the huge thing, but if you live here, you get more of a feel for kind of where the Southern writers are coming from, what they're describing, and some of the nuances. So out of the gate, I have some sympathy for Faulkner. Here he is, a Southerner, and I've lived in a lot of the places that he has. And he's a great writer, one of the great modernists, a great stylist. So why would I title the video Faulkner Sucks? Because I like Faulkner, but I really like him, and I haven't read everything he's written, but I've read enough to where I didn't want to keep going, because I like one book in particular of his and can kind of pass on the others. And it's not one of the ones that, it is one of the main ones, but it's not one that generally gets called his best work by most people on average. So I'm going to give the reason for that and kind of an overview on my view on Faulkner. He's famous for very long sentences, kind of David Foster Wallace length, even maybe longer than Joyce. James Joyce was more playful with the language, more poetic. Faulkner gets really intricate with his thoughts. The language is probably more straightforward than Joyce's, but he brings a lot of complexity in with who the speaker is and the intricacies of the prose itself, phrase after phrase after phrase, and it all makes sense, but it's so intricate and long that it's easy to lose track as you're reading, and it's a complicated, sometimes, project to make sense of it all. But it does make perfect sense, and it's worth the trouble and time to get into it. And a lot of people say that the best way to read Faulkner is to read it out loud, because he was writing even more than Joyce did it too, but maybe Faulkner even more, where it's very idiomatic to the way people speak in a locality, right? Joyce was writing the way Irish people speak on the street, and Faulkner's writing a lot of times in a way Southerners in the U.S. speak on the street or whatever. So if you read it out loud, sometimes it makes more sense, because it is often very vocal type language. Whereas if you just read it on the page, you don't hear the sound as much, and you don't make as much sense sometimes out of the writing. So, and most of Faulkner's best books are in this style, more or less. Some are more intricate and stream of consciousness and convoluted than others. I have a couple books here. This is probably the most cited as his best book, Sound and the Fury. It's pretty intricate language. The first part is narrated by a character who is slow a little bit, and so the first part is known to be more complicated even than the latter two parts, and you can read the description right off the back. It's about a family in the South and their kind of downfall, basically. The Compson family, featuring some of the most memorable characters in American literature: beautiful, rebellious Caddy, the man-child Benji, haunted, neurotic Quentin, Jason, the brutal cynic, and Dilsey, their black servant. That's the family you get into. And very convoluted text, very intricate, and kind of almost like a puzzle sometimes to figure out what's going on. His other book, a lot of people say, is his best, is Absalom, which is longer, very modernist in its structure, like Sound and Fury is. Kind of similar to Sound and Fury, but longer, and I think, if you want to really generalize it. My problem with those two books, and with everything else of Faulkner's that I've read, and most of his major stuff, is that the subject matter is Southern post-Civil War society and kind of the decline and fall of these white people, basically. Former plantation owners in Absalom. Same with the family in Sound and Fury. And it's kind of this drawn out, intricate tragedy about how these families, when after the South lost the Civil War, how they were on top economically, and they decline and degrade and they devolve, and you see these people fall apart. The problem for me is I just don't care that much about that decline. It's not interesting enough to me. Faulkner obviously grew up seeing it, and it fascinated him. He's not coming at it from any particular angle. If anything, he's showing the kind of the moral degeneracy of these people and the way they fell apart. But it's not that simple either. It's kind of the spectacle of their downfall. And I just don't think that subject matter means as much as time moves on as it did to Faulkner. It's just not interesting enough. They may be great characters, but it's hard for me to care about what they're going through, because they're kind of just cheap white people, you might say. I'm sure that's easy for a lot of people to agree with. Well, I that's how I see it. However, this book here is the one I like, As I Lay Dying, and it's a little different than his other stuff, because in this one it's more of a comedy. It's not about the grand downfall of these white Southerners. This is a Southern white family, and they're going to bury their mother, and there's narrated by 4 or 5 of them. And this one, unlike the others, is more just funny and about the characters themselves, not the grand historical processes that are interacting with, that are driving their lives. They're just kind of bumbling Southern people. It has a feel to me like Huckleberry Finn, where you're down and dirty with some lower class Southern Americans, and they're interesting, they're wild, they're funny, they're emotional, but in this book there's not the huge backdrop of the South and the post-Civil War era that I just don't care to read that much about. And so you have all the modernist language and the intricacies of his writing here, and you don't have all that historical baggage. It's a fun read. The characters are great. They're just normal. They're not in these formerly grand Southern American families. They're just regular people, even more than in his other books. And this is who I want to read about. Regular people doing regular things, observed very delicately and lovingly and hilariously and poignantly. And that's the book for me. And this is what I think is Faulkner's best work, As I Lay Dying. I could really give or take the rest of it. I think he's a good writer, but I don't think the subject matter is on point. But in this book, it is. So this is the one I'd recommend. I would say skip all the rest. This is so good that it is one of my favorite books, and his other books I don't care about. That's my perspective on Faulkner. I encourage you to read As I Lay Dying. And does Faulkner suck? Maybe. In a lot of his books, it's too much. The subject matter is not worth the effort, but in this one, it is worth the effort. That's my take. Cheers.